Chinese President Xi Jinping says he does want to work out an initial trade deal, the interim deal with the U.S. He did meet with the former Secretary of State, Henry Kissinger, in Beijing. Okay, we've got the Hong Kong Human Rights Bill heading to the president. And now this, the second Senate bill, would ban the export of tear gas, pepper spray, rubber bullets, and stun guns to the Hong Kong police. Let's bring in my next expert. He's one of the leading experts on geopolitics. He is Heritage Foundation National Security and Foreign Policy expert, retired Lieutenant Colonel James Carafano. Colonel, thank you so much for joining us. Your assessment on all of this?
Well, look, number one, the bill is veto-proof. This is going to happen. We're done. Number two, the U.S. really can't practice linkage. In other words, you give on this and we'll give on that. We've got too many areas where we're competing with the Chinese. And if we try to start to link them together, the Chinese will just tie us knots. The Chinese are just going to have to live with this. It's really something of their own making. There's a path forward in there. The Chinese government needs to reaffirm one country, two systems. If they did that, a lot of this would subside. The government of Hong Kong has to make clear that they're there for the people of Hong Kong, not to do the bidding of Beijing. And the rioters and the protesters in the street, they have to acknowledge, they have to accept a confession and reconciliation process. People confess what they did wrong, police are held accountable, and then we move on. So all three sides really need to get to this and move forward. Yeah. And the United States isn't going to break that logjam. They have to do that.
Yeah, let's move on to what happened in Iran. Disturbing developments. Possibly upwards of 200 demonstrators, according to Amnesty International, may have been killed. We don't know the number. More than 1,000 arrested in Iran in protests against a religious dictatorship there. Iran accused of using bullets and snipers to attack the protesters. Your assessment of Secretary of State Mike Pompeo calling on Iranians to send videos documenting these human rights abuses.
Yeah, I think transparency is the most important instrument. I think that's important in situations like Hong Kong and Venezuela alone, and then let the world see, and then people can be held accountable for that. Look, you could say whatever you want about President Trump, but he has given Iran a really bad day. This is on top of everything else that happened. Protests in Lebanon against Iran, protests in Iraq against Iran, and then the most serious protests we've seen in Iran since the Green Revolution. Because of the pressure that the administration has put on, he's really put this regime in a very tight spot.
You know, sir, Colonel, your assessment, to your point, Iran is on the ropes. Iran is trying to blame the West, but the regime is accused of blowing Iran's money on terrorist wars. We know that hospitals reportedly are overflowing with people wounded in these protests. Iran did block the internet, isolating the nation. I'm looking at numbers, 1 out of 7 out of a job. The IMF said that could rise to 1 out of 5 in the next 5 years. The jobless rates are skyrocketing in Iran.
So there were actually claims that these protests were actually in some ways engineered by the hardliners in order to kind of displace the government and move Iran even further to the right to crack down even more. But boy, if that's true, they really messed up, because they do not have a way to deal with the unrest. But in many ways, it's very similar to the problem faced in Hong Kong. The government seems just unable to really deal with this. On the other hand, there's not really a place for the demonstrators to go. They're not going to overthrow the regime. And so, again, it's one of these things where, how does this end? But from a U.S. perspective, I think this is exactly what we want to do. Keep the pressure on the Iranian government, even if they never come to the table for another Iran deal. Cutting off their money, it limits their ability to do bad things in the region, and it distracts them, and they're less of a destabilizing force, and that's good for us.
Yeah, to your point, Iran's exports of oil have plummeted to 500,000 barrels a day, down from 2 million just last year. Colonel, your assessment of Iran now reportedly holding major air defense drills and exercises as the U.S. military moves through the Strait of Hormuz. Your reaction to that?
Yeah, look, the Iranians are just trying to do anything they can to look tough and to distract from this. And they might try some other things. But, this has been a pattern of Iranian behavior going back to when they shot down the U.S. drone. They're going to look for some ways and stuff. But, look, they cannot close the straits. They cannot do that. They can do something here or there that's a bit provocative, but they don't have a sustained capability to do that. And their economy's in shambles. They really can't afford a conflict. There are also reports that maybe the Iranians would try to do some external thing, attack Israel, Saudi Arabia, maybe some U.S. ships, in order to distract from the internal pressure. But that would be a disastrous attempt on their part, because they won't get very far like they haven't before. and that won't distract the internal revolt in the country.
How about just come to the table and negotiate with the president? Colonel,
well, they want to
go ahead, final word.
Yeah, they want to wait out and see him and hope he doesn't get reelected. Another guy comes in, but this is a point where North Korea and Iran are linked because as long as we're tough on the North Koreans, we're sending the signal to the Iranians, hey, don't ever expect an easy time for us. So we need to stay tough on the North Koreans, not just because we need to be tough on North Korea, but also to send the right message to the Iranians.
Colonel, great to see you. Thank you for your service to our country. Come back soon.
Thanks for having me.
Coming